So when I was first flying to Australia, I had a stopover in Manila in the Philippines on a flight between Bangkok and Brisbane, as I was flying with Philippine Airlines. Now, on stopovers, I generally like to do a longer stopover because I find it's better to break up a long flight. And usually most places, if the stopover is less than 24 or 48 hours, you don't need a visa. So I said I might as well do a longer stopover. I think it was about 20 hours or something, and explore a bit of Manila. But it ended up being longer than that. So I landed in Manila. I asked would there be any problems me leaving the airport and coming back for the second leg of the flight. I was told no, just to go to the customer service desk to let them know, because I think something to do with transferring my bag or something. I don't know how it made a difference me leaving the airport, but this would become significant later on, because I later found out that going to Australia from the Philippines, you have to get your bag checked before you leave Manila. Now, as I would later miss my flight, this became a bit of an issue. So my internet didn't work anymore because I got rid of my data roaming from back home. I did not have an eSIM anymore because I'm only there a day. So I had to use the airport Wi-Fi, which was a bit risky, to try get a Grab. So Grab is obviously like Uber in Southeast Asia. Managed to get one because it's like 1 a.m. at this stage. So I booked a hostel which was £9 a night. So like what, 18 Australian dollars per night. First impression of Manila is I noticed there's no street lights, and sadly a lot of poverty, where the level of which I hadn't seen since I've been in India. So particularly at night you saw like whole families sleeping on the streets, things like that. I arrived at my hostel and considered it as a cheap hostel. This is a bit shocking to see. They had armed security, so I was an armed security guard at the door. He signed me in and I was able to check in because I'd text beforehand to say that I'd be getting there late at night. Got up the next day and the plan was I wanted to explore Manila a bit. I did get to visit the Pacific War Cemetery, which is the biggest American World War II cemetery anywhere in the world. But that was only because my flight got delayed. So the plan for the day was to more or less just take in the city, see what I can. Didn't really have much particular plans. In my room in the hostel there is this Canadian dude, and he was saying that he got stranded in Manila for 3 days because of the weather. It's like wet, it doesn't seem that bad. And then I got a notification. The airline sent me an email about Tropical Storm Katrin, I think it was, and just saying to look at the updates. But I was like, yeah, it's only a tropical storm, none of the flights seem to have been cancelled, I should be okay. Went exploring in the city, torrential rain, torrential downpour, and shockingly enough, with all the ATMs, they'd armed security with shotguns as well. Bizarrely, because of that, I felt safe at the ATM because there's an armed guy there, but I was kind of wondering for the rest of the city why the necessity to have that. I didn't see any specific danger when I was there, but everyone around banks, around Western hotels, hostels is heavily armed, and there was some very sketchy situations I ended up in. So naturally I thought the best way to start the trip was to go to Jollibee's, which for anyone who doesn't know, Jollibee's is a Filipino fried chicken restaurant. It's in the UK last time I was there. I think it's spread into Australia soon as well. But it was originally an ice cream parlour, and then they expanded to fried chicken. But in the Philippines itself, you can get fried chicken, spaghetti, bizarrely, and then rice. It's like rice comes in like it's like a burger wrapper, and then gravy as well. Well, I found it very tasty, but good start to the day, even with the miserable weather. They also had the famous jeepneys there, which were pretty cool. I didn't get a chance to ride in one because I was too afraid. I didn't really know how it worked. I might get ripped off or something. But maybe on another trip I'll have to do it. So basically they're all like originally all World War II Jeeps converted to be used for public transport as buses, but they're pretty cool to look at because they're very unique. They're all decorated, painted differently. But I ended up getting a metro. I wanted to see Manila Old Town and the José Rizal Monument. So José Rizal, he's seen as the Filipino national hero. But this is hotly contested because José Rizal was non-violent and he never actually led the Philippine Revolution. So for 300 years, from 1565 until 1898, Spanish ruled the Philippines. Hence today, many Filipinos have Spanish-sounding names, and also it's generally a devoutly Catholic country. Now there's also Muslims in certain areas, but generally most people are Catholic. By the late 19th century, a Filipino independence movement had emerged. José Rizal, some people would say, only wanted reform, more rights for Filipinos, didn't necessarily want independence. Other revolutionaries led the revolution itself, which obviously they fought for their independence against the Spanish and later the Americans. So around this time, the Spanish fought the Americans in what is known as the Spanish-American War. This originated in the Americans intervened in Cuba, in the Cuban Revolution at the time there. How the Philippines involved is, as a Spanish colony, the Americans attacked Spanish ships in Manila Harbor. This ultimately saw the Americans emerge as a major colonial power. The Spanish Empire essentially was defunct after this. They seceded Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, the Americans purchased from Spain. Where did this leave the Filipino independence movement? They had originally fought against the Spanish, and then the transfer of power to the Americans resulted in War of Independence against the Americans, which the Americans won. America would retain control of the Philippines until it got its independence in 1946. However, during World War II, the Philippines was occupied by the Japanese. Now, José Rizal was seen as a threat by the Spanish, and as a result, he was executed and martyred in 1898, despite not being a revolutionary or not engaging in violence. Now, this resulted in him being seen as the national hero of the Philippines. Now, why this is controversial is because, as mentioned, he wasn't a revolutionary and he wasn't engaged in violent acts to resist colonialism by force. It is said by some the reason he was made out as this national hero was particularly during American rule, because it was feared more violent or radical revolutionaries, if they were made out as to be national heroes, that could inspire Filipinos to rise up against American rule. So therefore it suited the Americans to promote Rizal, as he was non-violent and believed it rather in reform as opposed to resisting colonialism by force. So I visit the José Rizal Memorial, which is the location where he was executed in 1898 by the Spanish. Particularly executing someone who was non-violent, wasn't a revolutionary, further turned people against Spanish rule at the time, and further inspired the Filipino independence movement. Filipino First Republic was declared, but ultimately that was crushed by the Americans, who took over soon after. So from the moment I arrived in Manila, it had been quite wet, rainy, windy. It was the tropical storm there, a typhoon, and I'd gotten the metro down to the Rizal Monument, which Metro Manila is just absolutely huge city. It goes on forever. I got scammed for the first time the way down. I bought a bottle of water which had one of them tops that wouldn't come off like in Europe, which was quite annoying as well. I found the Philippines very mixed. I found some people would scam you, so you have to be careful, but some wouldn't. And they very obviously wouldn't, they'd be honest, they'd be upfront. Whereas in Delhi, everyone's trying to scam you. It's the difference. Now, obviously, that was Delhi, other parts of India were different. But I found it very mixed in Manila. So, for example, when I went to buy the bottle of water, the woman was like, oh, 50 pesos. And then I was like, right, fine, I was about to pay. And she's like, no, sorry, I meant 80 pesos. And I'm like, for God's sake. So I just paid the 80 pesos. I'm like, I'm not bothered arguing over this. Like 30 pesos, like 35 pence or 70 cents Australian. I'm not going to argue over that. When I was at the Rizal Monument, the weather kind of started to take a turn. So this is the second time I got scammed. So there's this bloke with like a horse and cart. And I want to go down to the old town. There's like an old Spanish colonial era fort. So I said, can you do it for 150, which I think is more than fair. It wasn't that long of a distance, like I think like $4 Australian or something. But if he was willing to negotiate, that'd be different. But he's like, yeah, no problem. That horse and cart ride is a bit crazy. We're in the middle of traffic, in the middle of a typhoon. I'm getting absolutely soaked.
How old are you?
But we get there and literally I was only in the thing for 5 minutes. I know like $4 sounds very low, but I was literally only in the thing for like 5 minutes. And then he's like 1,500, he's like, it's a 1,500 minimum or something. Or I think it's even more, I think it was like £30, so like $60 Australian. He's like, oh, there's a minimum. And I was like, that's not what he said. And he's like, oh no, it is what I said. And I was like, no, it's not. So that's what bugs me. It's like being lied to. If he was upfront and said, yeah, it's a minimum, then I can make a decision, see what I want to do. Because the thing is, in India, when they try to scam you, if you kind of just keep saying no, there's not much they can do. Whereas the Philippines, like, I don't really know the lay of the land, so I don't want to risk it and get myself into trouble. So eventually he agreed for, I think, like a slightly reduced price. He would take me on like a tour around the old town, which as it turned out wasn't even really around the old town. We went around it, if that makes sense. We ended up going through Chinatown. It was interesting, besides the fact, one, I didn't get to see the fort, which I really wanted to see because I was on this tour, the horse and cart. And then the guy is like really aggressive when I was saying, no, I'll pay the agreed price. And then all of a sudden he's really friendly again. He's trying to make conversation. I'm just like, go away. We went through like, I think it was Chinatown. I wanted to go to the fort, didn't get to do that, which annoyed me. As well, I got absolutely soaked. Basically, yeah, going around in a horse and cart during a typhoon is a terrible idea.
Oh, getting storm. I've seen that. Yeah. Oh.
It was crazy though, because all the kids were like dancing in the rain. I'm there like absolutely soaked to the skin, pissed off because I'm on this horse and cart ride that I don't want to do. To be honest, it's me being stubborn. I should have probably just taken the L and went to the fort anyway, but it was interesting. We went through different neighborhoods. It's funny because one of the kids, you can see, is terrified of the horse, and the guy was shouting them to get out of the way. But yeah, they're all in the middle of a typhoon dancing in the rain.
Hey.
But yeah, he brought me back to the Rizal Monument, absolutely soaked, and no umbrella, no nothing. So, like, soaked through my hat, soaked through everything. So, this is what I mean, it's mixed. There's some guys selling umbrellas there, and I was like, oh, this guy's definitely gonna rip me off. He gave me a fair price, we negotiated, so I was happy with that. I gave him some extra change as well because he was honest. So that's what I mean, it's kind of mixed. At this stage, even though there's other stuff I wanted to do, I was completely soaked, so I made the decision just to head back to the hostel, clean myself up, get a drink and prepare for my flight. Another interesting thing about Manila is obviously because it's an American colony, it's strange because like a lot of street names are in English, like streets named after American presidents, American figures. So a lot of people speak English. There's also, I don't know if people still speak Spanish, but the main language is Tagalog that people speak, but a lot of people speak English as well, being an American colony up until relatively recently. I suppose kind of like in India in that way, because it's a British colony, you have a lot of English speakers as well. But yeah, brief trip to Manila. This stage preparing to fly out to Australia. So it was a night flight from Manila to Brisbane. Would get to Brisbane the next day. And this is where everything went wrong. So I was having a drink, a nice quiet drink in the hostel, and I can just see outside that the weather is just awful. And the staff of the hostel, the Filipino staff, they're like to me, they're like, oh, you might be stranded here. They're like, check, is your flight going to be cancelled? And the cynic in me, I was like, oh, they just want me to stay another night. And it turned out they're 100% correct. So the flight actually took off. So I was following the flight update, see if it's going to be cancelled. The flight actually took off. But this is the issue with somewhere like Manila, is they don't have the infrastructure to deal with these typhoons or tropical storms. So I'm ordering a Grab while having a drink. I was leaving plenty of time because I heard Manila Airport's a nightmare to get through. So I was going sure I was there over 3 hours beforehand, even though I didn't have to check my bags again, but just because my bag had to be checked before I flew out, and then getting through security, immigration, everything. Because when I was leaving India, even same thing, I left 3 hours, like I was stuck in immigration for ages and ended up having to run for the flight, even though I was there over 3 hours early. So I'm ordering Grabs, and I had like twice or three times where they're about like 5 minutes away and then they just cancel. So I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And I think I jinxed myself because I'd actually, once I got the email about the tropical storm, I was like, hope I don't get stuck here, ha ha ha. I don't know why, it's like I didn't take it seriously, but I get a notification on my phone saying it's an orange weather warning. Next thing is upgraded to a red weather warning. So I'm like, why aren't these Grabs showing up? And I'm walking down the stairs and I can just see flooding everywhere out in the street. So this is the weird thing, we're all in the bar, still having a few drinks, still having a laugh, like, and the whole street is just flooded. But it's like completely normalised. It's like, nobody's panicking. When I got back to the hostel, it was fine outside, and then all of a sudden everywhere was just completely flooded. So I panicked because I was like, if the flight still takes off, I'm not getting my money back. I'm not getting rescheduled. And the airline's position was, well, you just stop over, you should have stayed in the airport. So I'm like, how much is it going to cost me to get to Brisbane and rebook now? It's like, this is the last thing I need before moving to Australia is forking out like £500 or something on the new flight. So the issue now was, I was stranded in the hostel because cars couldn't get down, so the water was like knee deep, but the flight was still going to take off. So I panicked. I was like, if I walk and can get to where the road isn't flooded, then I can get a Grab from there. Because eventually it started coming up on Grab that there's none available. I later found out, because I was walking down the street, literally end up taking my runners off through, which probably isn't a good idea if I cut my foot or something, or if there's any bacteria or something in there that I'm not used to. But I panicked. I was like, right, I'm gonna make it to the airport by any means possible. There's this bloke, and yet again, this what I mean, the contrast in the Philippines, that the people that were trying to scam me earlier, and this bloke went out of his way to help me. So he was like directing traffic in the street. Like, he's just some random bloke. He was just helping out, directing traffic, like directing them away from the water. So I was asking him, I was like, is there any way to get to the airport? And he's kind of like basically thinks I'm screwed. He was just like, oh, well, it's gonna cost you a fortune if you miss your flight because they're not gonna let you change it. And I was like, yeah, I know. So then he's like, he took pity on me. He's like, oh, he's like, I would try bring you, but I can't and all this. And I'm like, nah, it's fair enough. It's like, do you think it's worth keep walking to try to get a taxi? And he's like, well, the issue is all the taxi drivers, because the rain's gotten too bad and it's too flooded, they've all went home. They'll come back out once the rain subsides. It's not looking good now, and at this stage I should have just given up. But I was chatting to him and he was like, right, if you give me like 500 pesos, which I think will cover the petrol, he's like, I'll try bring you. He's like, I have a big van and might be able to get through the water. His wife, I could hear his wife was going crazy at him, and I kind of felt bad afterwards because this guy essentially, for like 500 pesos, risked getting his car stuck in the floodwater just to help me get to the airport and help save me some money. So he went out of his way, and that's why his wife was going crazy at him. But he decided to give me a hand anyway. But we tried to get there anyway, and because of the floodwaters, even on the expressway, I thought once we got to the expressway to the airport, we'd fly out. No, there's floods everywhere, so it's just like standstill traffic. Like, I think it took us like an hour and a half to get a quarter of the way to the airport or something, and you need to get petrol anyway.
They said it's too high there. Above the knee. You can go this way. Okay. Thank you. Trust my van.
And you can probably hear him in the videos, he's a funny guy. There's other cars around us getting stuck, motorbikes, but because the van was a bit higher up, we could go through the flood water, lucky enough. We got to the petrol stations completely flooded, so we went to another one across the road. That was people pushing cars that got stuck in the water. It was just anarchy, absolute anarchy.
I think here they can feel it.
When we're at the petrol station, I think it's 40 minutes before my flight's due to take off, and we weren't even halfway to the airport, so I was like, right, there's no point in giving it a go. And yeah, well, very appreciative for that guy. He couldn't have been more helpful. Just some random stranger decided to help me out, so shout out to that bloke. So what could I do? Went back to the hostel, booked another night, had one of the cheap cocktails and waited for it all to blow over. Ended up having a good laugh that night. I had the issue, how on earth do I get to Australia? So I got in touch with the airline. So they're going to charge me a cancellation fee for missing the second half of the flight. And then I'd have to pay for a new flight on top of that. So they're being very stubborn. And as I said, I didn't really have a leg to stand on, because from their point of view, they're like, it's a stopover, you should stay at the airport. You're in the Philippines, you should make an allowance. It's not our fault you couldn't get to the airport. But I kept at them and at them and at them. And eventually they agreed to put me on the next flight free of charge, no cancellation fee. So shows persistence sometimes just works. It saved myself a bit of money. So that's a relief anyway. And literally, like, the street looked like a canal when I went to bed. It's like being in Venice. And then the crazy thing, just as quick as the whole place flooded, when I woke up the next morning, the whole place was bone dry. Something that was crazy is I actually got a bit sunburnt even though it was raining all day, because that's how strong like the tropical sun is. But even yet again, the friendliness of the Filipinos, that when I was going to bed later that night, a few of the staff in the hostel, they were eating their dinner late night and they offered me some, so I never knew that spicy ready noodles and bread could taste so nice. So in a way, I'd a much better impression of the Philippines because of the kindness of the people in the second half of the trip when things got tough, compared to when earlier I'd been ripped off. But like a lot of places, good, bad people everywhere. So one advantage of the flight being rescheduled is I got to go to the Manila World War II American Cemetery, which is the biggest American World War II cemetery anywhere in the world. So the Pacific Cemetery, so people who died fighting in the Pacific. There's Filipinos, Americans there. I've visited a few different World War II cemeteries, mostly in Europe. Arlington Cemetery as well. This one, I think 17,000 people buried there, commemorates over 36,000 who were missing in action. The cemetery goes on forever. I think 3,600 people buried there unidentified. It kind of gives you an idea of the scale of the loss in the Pacific, and that's only like one segment of World War II. So even though I got to see the last post there, and there's a Filipino American Vietnam veteran who was honoured there. There's 29 Medal of Honor recipients buried there, which the Medal of Honor is the highest medal for gallantry in the American military. There's also Vicente Lim, a brigadier general in the Filipino army during World War II, is commemorated there. He was tortured and killed by the Japanese, and I actually recognised his name because on the 1,000 peso bill he is also commemorated along with other Filipino martyrs from World War II, because obviously they were under American colonial rule at the time, but fiercely resisted the Japanese occupation. It must be remembered many Filipinos fought side by side with the Americans, and as a result were involved in things like the Bataan Death March and suffered cruelty at the hands of the Japanese occupiers. Now, so the cemetery is actually built on former Fort McKinley, named after former US President William McKinley, who was president during the Spanish-American War before he was assassinated. But the area around where the cemetery is very interesting because, in complete contrast to the area I was staying in, it was very modern. It felt like an American city. Well, maybe an American city minus all the crackheads, but very clean, that area. And certainly there's no armed security like the other part Manila I was in. I went and tried McDonald's there, which, interestingly, I read McDonald's found it hard to succeed in the Philippines because of Jollibee's, which Jollibee's was more suited to local tastes, different like sweet treats and stuff like that. But interestingly, McDonald's now does gravy, rice and fried chicken exactly like Jollibee's, except you can get like your regular McDonald's items like quarter pound with cheese. So you could argue it's the best of both worlds. And also it's the only McDonald's I've ever been to where they give you proper cutlery. So Filipino McDonald's up there is one of my favourite McDonald's. But yeah, I walked around that that area, and the issue was, as mentioned at the start, is I had no internet, no eSIM, so I needed to get back to the hostel. And based on the experience the night before, I was extremely panicked. I kept trying to hail down a taxi, no one would stop, so I didn't really know what was going on. I started to panic, so I kept walking, and eventually I went into an area where it was more like a slum area, and it was very sketchy. But I'd walked out of, because I was in I think the CBD. I walked out of the CBD, and it was this busy road. I was I'll have to get a taxi here. Probably wasn't the best idea, but I needed to get to the airport pronto. But I got a taxi eventually, and yet again, I was expecting the guy to try charge me a premium rate or much higher, and he charged me a very low fare rate on the meter. I looked up, that was the regular rate. So as I said, that's the difference, that some people were looking to scam me, take advantage of me, but most people came across there were fair and reasonable. So I made it back to the hostel, and the contrast compared to the night before was crazy. Literally now the same area is completely flooded, was completely bone dry. Got a grab to the airport. Now, I was there over 3 hours early because I'd heard that Manila airport's one of the hardest to get through in the world. I had no issues with immigration, security or anything, but I did have one issue with my bag. So as mentioned before, the bags, before they go to Australia, they have to be searched, and then once it's deemed that you have nothing that you're not meant to have, they put it through. I assume it's to avoid situations like, if you've ever seen Nothing to Declare and people are bringing a load of exotic fruit and stuff, and or cigarettes or God knows what. So I get there to where the bag check is, and they can't find my bag, which I was kind of half expecting. So first of all, my bag will have been transferred to the plane the night before, and then when they realised I'm not going, it will have been taken off. So I was it's probably lost somewhere in the airport. They're oh, well, fine, and just sit down. I'm sitting there an hour, and I can see they're communicating with the other staff on Facebook Messenger, and I'm I thought this isn't dodgy at all. And they kept saying, yeah, we're just waiting your bag. And then literally about 10 minutes before the flight's due to board, I was sitting there over 2 hours at this stage, they're kind of all looking at each other blankly. And eventually she just goes, oh yeah, we have your bag. She's you can go aboard. And I'm but you have to check the bag while I'm there. You have to go down the lift and they check the bag while you're there. So it's my bag hasn't been checked, so you obviously don't have my bag. She's no, I'll be on the plane. I'm but I haven't checked it, And so if you do have my bag, is this going to cause problems for me when I get to Australia? And if you don't, I said, you know what, it's obviously don't have my bag, but they just know I won't board without being told that they have my bag. So I knew I'm likely going to get to Australia just with the clothes that are on my back. And then I'm walking down the corridor, and next thing I hear sir, come back. And the lady runs after me, and she's yeah, we found your bag. And I'm thinking, a minute ago you said that you had my bag. Literally last minute, 10 minutes before I had to board, they found my bag. So I went down, checked it. I had to answer about 20 questions. Why'd you miss your flight? Why'd you leave your bag? Etc. Which is fair enough, I suppose. But made the flight anyway. Was relieved to be getting to Australia. Honestly, I'd like to give the Philippines another go. And I heard the islands are a completely different vibe to Manila. Manila is crazy city. I do get the impression it did feel kind of sketchy. The fellas with guns. There's a lot of poverty there, unfortunately, but I do find it's mixed. You will get some people in the tourist areas try to rip you off, but I found generally people are quite friendly. They're not looking to rip you off, and even as I said, that bloke literally went out of his way to help me. One last history tangent, but the airport is actually Ninoy Aquino International, which he's in terms of Filipino recent history, a very interesting figure. So in the 1970s, a man named Ferdinand Marcos was in charge of the Philippines. He was accused of being a dictator, being oppressive, but Aquino was a senator at the time. He was in prison in the 70s for opposing Marcos. And while in prison, he became ill with cancer, as far as I know. He requested to go to the United States to receive treatment. Marcos agreed because he didn't want Aquino dying in a Filipino prison while he's in charge, and also he didn't have to deal with him anymore if he's in the United States, so it was a self-imposed exile. He came back in 1983, and upon landing at Manila Airport, he was assassinated. Now this essentially martyred him, and this started what was known as the People Power Revolution, which was the movement to remove Marcos, which eventually succeeded. They used the song Tie a Yellow Ribbon Around the Old Oak Tree, because that song is about someone returning from prison to find out they're still loved, and that symbolised Aquino returning from exile to find out he's still loved. So people, as part of the revolution, tied yellow ribbons around trees. Seems relatively peaceful revolution as far as I know. Now Aquino's wife later became president, and his son, but the current president of the Philippines is actually Marcos's son. So interesting there, but I wouldn't know too much about Filipino politics, and I don't think it's my place to comment, but I thought it was interesting because the airport is named after Ninoy Aquino, the airport he was assassinated in. So a bit of a chaotic stopover, but not really much harm done. I was able to change the flight in the end, so it didn't really cost me anything. Just an extra night in the Philippines, but certainly next time I visit the Philippines, I'll have to make different allowances and give myself more time, all things considered.